Well, New York State got some bad news today, hearing that we'll likely lose 2 congressional seats. Our guest, former Congressman Jim Walsh, has a lot of experience when it comes to this. Thanks so much for joining us, Congressman.
You're welcome, Caitlin. It's good to be with you.
And now, in your experience, you served for 20 years, and this isn't the first time that you've seen New York State lose seats in the House, correct?
Correct. Actually, the House has been losing seats since my father served in the Congress back in the 70s. At one time, New York had, I believe, 47 seats. If we do lose these 2, we'll be down to 27 seats. And at the time, New York had 47 seats, California had 16. California now has 55 seats. So the population clearly has shifted west and south.
Yeah, it's certainly quite a difference. Even in your tenure, you've seen New York kind of hemorrhaging seats. What does that mean for people who live in New York State?
Well, it means that the state has less representation. Every member of Congress will represent more people. When I served, we had about 680,000 constituents. That will go up probably up close to 750,000. When you think back at the beginning of the country, members of Congress had just several thousand of constituents. Now it'll be close to 750,000. So there'll be more constituents to deal with. There'll be less power for New York when an issue comes up that hurts New York. There'll only be 27 votes voting to protect New York instead of 29. And California, Texas, and Florida continue to get bigger with more clout, more representatives, more votes, and probably more money ultimately.
Yeah, more money indeed. Census data moves about $400 billion every time the census is redone. Now, New York State's going to be missing out on some of that money, presumably.
Yeah, the formulas will reduce because population's been reduced. It means less money for education, less money for housing, less money for transportation, and less clout in the Congress too, because your congressional delegation, what you always try to do is have as many members on as many committees as possible, and 2 or 3 on the major committees, like Appropriations and Ways and Means. New York will be spread thinner, and therefore less representation on those committees of jurisdiction, which ultimately are the ones that make the decisions that affect funding.
And it had long been assumed that New York State was going to lose 1 seat. Losing 2 is certainly an additional hit for the state.
Yeah, it is. I don't believe these numbers are finalized yet. I don't believe they will be until December, and there may be some sort of an appeal, but right now it's not looking very good.
And the way that the districts are drawn and redrawn has a lot to do with the New York State Senate and Assembly, the legislature, how they decide to redraw those lines. And you yourself saw your district move. Your number changed.
Yeah, my district initially went from Syracuse is sort of the North Star of the 25th Congressional District. That's the center, and that doesn't change, but I had Madison County over to Hamilton and Colgate universities and Onondaga. Then I had Onondaga, Cortland, a little bit of Tioga, Broome, and Cortland counties and Cayuga counties. And then the last district, it was Onondaga, and Wayne County, and a little bit of Monroe County. So, and it's a very, very political process. The state legislature makes that decision along with the governor. They determine their own districts as well as members of Congress. So members of Congress need to spend time in Albany getting to know their representatives and the leaders of the state legislature, try to impress upon them the importance of keeping their district as consolidated as possible. But there are other considerations that come into it that don't necessarily help.
Well, you did mention that it's a political process, and certainly we've seen that play out in Albany. There has been a big movement to make this an independent redistricting process, where an independent committee would review the numbers and redraw the districts that way. What do you think about having something like that?
I don't know. I think any group that you put together has their own agenda. Sooner or later, if they don't when they start, they will by the time they're finished. Most states do it with the state legislature making that determination. It's served the country for 230 plus years. I don't know that it's worth changing. I know people are frustrated with politics, but they've done it before. By and large, it's worked. It causes some disruption, but that has to be as you lose and gain population. But games are played, certainly, and but I think no matter who does it, they're going to be fallible.
And you said games are played, and certainly the lines, drawing of the lines, I've heard it described as a formula, as a science. But when these lines are redrawn, upstate is likely to lose representation.
Well, from what I've been able to glean from the information, it looks like there'll be a downstate seat, which could be part of Long Island, and an upstate seat. And you know, the people from New York City think of upstate as everything north of Yonkers, so it's a big chunk of territory. You need to, as a member of Congress, you need to work with the legislature and stay close and pay attention. And but you know, ultimately they make their own decisions and they make their own deals. And the Assembly will have a plan, the Senate will have a plan, the governor will have a plan, and there are a lot of compromises that are made where the members of Congress are not in the room when those compromises are made. So our fate really is in their hands, and it's a very unsettling experience, believe me.
Yeah, I can imagine you'd kind of have your stomach in a knot. How was your experience with your district changing and shifting?
Well, as I said, it changed 3 times in the course of 20 years. My goal always was to keep Onondaga County whole, because Syracuse and the surrounding county have a lot in common, and it's best to have one representative there. Before I served in the Congress, when my father was in the Congress back in the 70s, he served the eastern half of the county, and he served the western half, Congressman Hanley served the eastern half. The community benefited well. The argument can be made that, you know, the more representatives you have that are in a city, the better. But I always made the argument that one representative knows that district better, and therefore it's best to keep it as contiguous as possible. But, you know, there are other fish to fry in Albany, as you know.
You know, you mentioned Western New York, and I have to ask you, because we have you here from Washington, D.C., there's an interesting character out of Western New York that's now at the top of your party's ticket running for governor. What are your impressions of Carl Palladino?
Well, you know what? Part of this discussion we're having is about losing population. The reason we lose population, one of the reasons, probably the major reason, is because the cost of living is so high in New York State. Taxes are way too high. We have the highest taxes in the country. Part of that is because county property taxpayers pay half of the Medicaid bill that the state should be paying. So the state should take that Medicaid burden off of the counties. You know, I don't know Carl Palladino. I've never met him. But if he says he's going to cut taxes, that makes him an attractive candidate to me, because I'm sick of New York State losing population, losing jobs, and just hemorrhaging our commerce.
And what direction do you see the Republican Party going in New York State? Do you think they have a real chance this year to really take back some seats and gain some power in the state?
Well, the Assembly is 2-to-1 plus. I don't see the Republicans ever winning the state Assembly back, but there's a chance that the state could win, the Republicans could win the state Senate. Jack Quinn, young Jack Quinn out in Buffalo, is in a really close race. He's a great young candidate. There are a couple of other races that could turn. You know, it's only 1 or 2 votes, so it could very well turn on just a few hundred votes in one part of the state. And the race for governor, you know, everybody thought Andrew Cuomo would win in a walkover, but the recent polls say that's not the case. I think people are frustrated, they're angry, they're disappointed in their government in Albany and in Washington, and they're ready for change.
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting year to watch politics, and thank you so much, Congressman, for your impressions. We appreciate it.
It's much more fun to watch them when you're not running.
I can imagine it would be. Thank you very much, Congressman Walsh.